So hello again, everyone. Welcome to you here in Basel and also to those of you who are joining us online for this dual debate on the topic of the golden times of peace building, ? So let me first introduce myself and also the topic of this debate, and then I will be introducing our two guests. So my name is Alexandra Wedl. I'm a program officer at swisspeace in the continuing education team, and I will be the moderator in this dual debate. And so what is this debate about? In this debate, we want to have a look at the big picture in peace building, so to say, and dive into some of the fundamental questions. Since our field has received much attention in the past year, with the war in Ukraine frequently being described as some sort of a turning point in international politics. There has been much debate about the failures and successes of peace building, questions such as what is the significance of such a turning point, and also what is the place of building in a world that is becoming more and more polarized. And as in every debate, look at this kind of from two sides. So if you want to take a positive outlook, you could say, speaking of a turning point, this means that we are experiencing a kind of reset on issues linked to international peace and security. And you could come to the conclusion that we are experiencing kind of a positive push in peace building. In short, that we are living in the golden times of peace building. On the other hand, you can also have a more critical outlook at this, and you could ask, is this assumption really accurate? What about all the other wars since the end of the Cold War? And you could question, was there ever a golden time in peace building? So this is kind of the starting point for our dual debate, and I'm very happy to have here two guests with me who are perfectly suited to debate this topic, not only from their vast knowledge, but also from their many years of experience. So I welcome here on stage with me Sonya Reines-Djivanides and Andrew Gilmour, whom I will just briefly now introduce. So Sonya has more than 15 years of experience in the peacebuilding and NGO sector, and she currently serves as the executive director of the European Peacebuilding Liaison office, which is the independent civil society platform of European NGOs and the largest conflict prevention and peacebuilding network in Europe. She's a skilled facilitator with experience in international conflict resolution, program development, and fundraising from a number of places, including Washington, D.C., Geneva, and Brussels. Sonya is also a visiting lecturer at the Brussels School of International Studies at the University of Kent, where she's teaching on mediation and negotiation. So warm welcome to you, Sonya. And on my other side, I have with me Andrew Gilmour, who's currently the executive director of the Berghof Foundation. And prior to that, he has been serving for 30 years with the United Nations, most recently as Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights from 2016 to 2019. And he held also senior UN positions in numerous conflict zones, including Iraq, South Sudan, the Middle East, the Balkans, Afghanistan, and West Africa. Andrew has also been teaching and researching at different institutions, most recently as a visiting fellow at the All Souls College in Oxford, where he worked on the linkages between climate change, conflict, and human rights. Warm welcome to you as well, Andrew. Before I give over to you, let me briefly explain how this debate will be working. So, the two debate dualists, as we should call them, are taking opposing sides. And please keep in mind that they are not necessarily reflecting their own position on the topic, and are also not necessarily buying in all the arguments they will be presenting. But we have assigned the roles. So Andrew will be on the pro side, taking more of the optimistic outlook on the issue, and will be arguing that yes, we are indeed in the golden times of peace building. Sonya, on the other hand, will be on the contra side, and she will be arguing, no, that there never was a golden time of peace building. We will start with Andrew, who will have 5 minutes. Then Sonya will respond again for 5 minutes. And then we will have another round where Andrew has 5 more minutes to respond to Sonya. And then Sonya will close off the debate at the end. Okay. And with that, I would say, Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Alexandra and swisspeace. Delighted to be here. First of all, I just want to rebut that the suggestion that anything I might say isn't entirely sincere. So, in fact, I have to say I feel very, very slightly like one of those unfortunate defendants at the Moscow show trials who were forced to publicly recant and say that, of course, they believed that they were living in the golden era of good comrade Stalin. And thanks to swisspeace and your choice of debate and choice of victim, I'm in a slightly similar position, and I have to say how clear it is that we're living in the golden era of peace building. I've always generally thought that anybody who talks about golden era is a bit of an idiot, but anyway, today I stand before you as that idiot. I've become that. St. Paul had his conversion on the road to Damascus. Mine this morning was on the railroad to Basel, and I find it now that incredible that there are people like my old friend Sonya who actually is going to try and tell you the otherwise. And I actually think we should call them out for what they are, sort of peddlers of pessimism, sort of declaimers of doom, defeatism, and decline, heralds of hopelessness. Anyway, but you might ask, how do I get into the position of sudden, unquenchable optimism? Now, I now feel I could give an 8-hour speech worthy of Fidel Castro explaining it, but alas, you've given me I only have 4 remaining minutes. So I think I'll quickly just give you 10 very good reasons why we are all living in the best of times. Number 1, United Nations, which you just mentioned. Well, despite Putin, despite Trump, despite Xi Jinping, it still exists. And the talk that people like Sonya are going to say about the geopolitical tensions, well, they're going to dissipate soon. And we will move on. We will return to the halcyon days of Dag Hammarskjöld of the 50s, where you and courageous and visionary leadership. Number 2, the EU. We have, despite Brexit, despite Orban, despite Salvini, it is still proceeding, and actually proceeding in a relative state of harmony with one another. Number 3, the Ukrainians are heroically defending our freedoms and democracy, and they will prevail if they are given the right assistance. As Winston Churchill once said, you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else first. And similarly, I think we can be very confident that the Swiss and the Germans will lift their export controls and the Ukrainians will be allowed to defend themselves. Number 4, now the wheels of international justice may roll very, very slowly, but there is progress, and there's progress particularly on the new crime, the crime of aggression. Now, there is a famous photograph of Hermann Göring at the Nuremberg tribunal, and he has a smile on his face. Well, I am confident that very soon there will be somebody else in a similar dock who might also attempt a smile, if the Botox permits. Then, number 5, democracy is in terrific shape. I mean, Trumpian Republicans lost, Le Pen lost, Bolsonaro lost, and we can be sure that's the last we'll hear of all of them. And any talk about these sort of anti-democratic coups to overthrow election results, we can put that to one side too. Number 6, the civil society. Now, we hear talk, it's very important in the peace-building field, about the shrinkage of civil society, but I mean, look at you. You look very, very well. And indeed, some of you have even come from Davos, so I think we can say civil society is in terrific form as well. Then budgets. We can't do peace building without it. But the gas prices have come right down, the economy is booming, and our very generous donors are shortly going to turn on the spigots of renewed financial resources to EPLO, to swisspeace, and to Berghof, and we're going to be raking it in. Number 8, mediation. well, we are at the apogee of mediation techniques. I mean, and negotiations. I mean, just look at how successful the Americans were with the Taliban, and we can see then. I think in future generations, forget Metternich and Talleyrand. If you really want to see a good example of principle combined with realpolitik, that's where we'll go. Number 9, artificial intelligence. Well, and that's a very useful tool in our peace-building field. And there is talk, we should of course reject, that people like the Chinese security services or Elon Musk could ever misuse it. I mean, how could it possibly fall into the wrong hands after all? And 10th and last in my litany of great examples of how the modern era is bubbling away like an Icelandic geyser with rosy prospects for us all, is climate change, and which is so complicating the peace builders' work and acting as a risk multiplier and everything else. But the visionary activities that are shown by our leaders at successive COPs surely shows that we have little to fear there. So I feel, with all that reasoning, that there isn't really much more to debate. And if I were Sonya, I might even consider withdrawing, because some Prussian duelists of the 19th century occasionally did that to avoid getting shot by pistol or scarred by saber. And it's a very honorable thing to do, and I will be very, very magnanimous. Anyway, but thank you very much indeed. That's it.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for this run-through through all the 10 arguments and for this impressive opening statement. So, Sonya, as a herald of hopelessness, how will you respond to this?
Well, first of all, I'm glad everybody had a good laugh. Great, because now we're going down back into reality. It's not the golden age of peace building. There wasn't one. One could hope there might be, but I could say that certainly we're in the golden age for those who are producing weapons. Military dominance and the perception of it isn't going to uphold global order. It's not going to solve the myriad of problems and challenges that people face in the years ahead. Global conflict trends in the decades that have passed have really shown the decline, that preparing also for war has not brought peace. Conflict has increased in number and in scale. And the Global Peace Index is one of the ways in which we track that. And we're seeing peacefulness on the decline year after year for the last 9 of the last 13 years since they've been tracking it. The long-term consequences of protracted conflicts and continued violence are really borne by the youngest generations. And if they're not directly suffering from conflict, they're worried about a variety of different elements. According to the United Nations estimates, there are 1.2 billion people aged between 15 and 24, and that's projected to grow 7% by 2030. And in the most fragile regions, where there's considerable conflict, the number of young people is projected to increase by 62% in 2050. They're confronted with global challenges. You mentioned climate change, Andrew, rising inequalities, complex threats on public safety, health, livelihood, human security. Peace is something that can and it has to be built. It's going to require strength and courage and bravery from politicians. No more of this quick decision-making, overselling the fixes in the short term, but really looking towards the long term. Afghanistan, estimates show that over 45,000 civilians were killed, and the cost was over $2.3 trillion US. Syria and Iraq cost another $2 trillion, killing thousands and displacing millions. The champions for peace builders are also on the decline, with budgets being cut and reoriented in other directions. If we think it's bad, it can always get worse. The rhetoric, the policies, and the implementation are drastically out of sync. I'm actually ending early so that we can keep this Jocelyn duel alive and well. Sorry to have taken the sunshine out of the day.
So peace is something that has to be built. How are you responding to Sonya's reply?
I think I might speak a bit longer, and I could have some more things to say in response. Okay, youth bubble. Obviously, it does pose problems. But when you look at the countries that do not have a lot of young people, and it isn't entirely a bad thing. I mean, looking I mean, I'm the one that's having to withdraw now, but partly didn't give me enough targets to have a go at. But I would say, it's slightly changed so now. I mean, yes, obviously things are pretty bleak, and but we have to. And while we of course admit it, we do fully. One has to keep going by realizing that there are things going in the right direction, and Ukraine is one of them. I mean, and it just sounds so abominably cynical to say that, which you didn't, by the way, Sonya. But the immense sacrifices that they are doing, and they really are on behalf of all of us. And there is not much really for them unless they get immense economic aid and everything else as well. And I'm not just talking about military aid, of course. There is a chance that, at least for other people, the war has had a silver lining. And the fact that the Chinese are, by all accounts, and I'm not an expert on China, but the Chinese are said, by those who do know more about it, that they are thinking much more seriously about the dangers of invading Taiwan, and the fact that the Western countries have, by and large, been extremely united. I know there's immense pressure on Germany in particular to deliver the Leopard tanks, and I suspect it will happen. But and the fact that the EU, I mean, Putin really did get it wrong on a number of fronts. He really did underestimate the degree to which the Ukrainians were going to put up in an incredibly brave resistance. And he really did underestimate the resolve of the Western countries to help him. And that it really is now. I mean, whatever sort of cynicism earlier I mean, said, that is a positive thing, not for the Ukrainian people, of course, for whom the suffering is immense. So, I mean, maybe we could, I thought we had a longer chunks. Maybe we could, rather than, because we could respond, Sonya could respond to that, and then we could continue.
I think we can do that.
Yeah, is that okay? Yeah.
I allow it.
Yeah.
So Sonya, so it's your go.
Yeah, I don't think any of us could look at a silver lining to the situation inside of Ukraine at the moment. The toll of the suffering, really the sort of ability to predict what's going to happen next and who's going to take the fall for it and elsewhere. I think what is also happening is it's not just Ukraine, and what we're seeing is a decline in attention to other spots. I mean, there's lots of other places that we could consider as frozen conflicts. As we know, there aren't frozen conflicts, there's just frozen solutions. And so there needs to be this ability to look elsewhere. And that's not happening. And as much as we're being told that civil society is going to continue to be supported, peace-building organizations and others in lots of different places, the mere fact is there's not enough money to go around. In terms of some of the other points, I would go back to both the UN and the EU that you had mentioned earlier, Andrew, and we have to go back to the essence of why those institutions exist and to serve whom. And great, they're not hollowed out, so no need to divest. And at the same time, who are they serving? How can we do better? It's not just, take the EU, I happen to live in Brussels, it's not just because the EU is doing something that it's doing well, necessarily. So I think those are two of the things that I would bring up in just that very first intervention. And I think I might have been short and you might have been a little light on youth.
I mean, I do see very much the danger of Ukraine sucking the oxygen out of other conflicts, and the point I completely agree with you on is that there's no silver lining for the people of Ukraine. I just meant in terms of global, of a warning to people who might be tempted to behave in a similar way to what the Russians have done. But I can say that there is nobody in the sort of Western governments I've been speaking to who doesn't see the truth of what I'm about to say, because I've raised it with so many of them, and nobody pushes back, is that it would be a disaster for those Western governments if they gave the impression that they were only interested in Ukraine, and therefore and as a result they would take their eye off the ball of Ethiopia, of Yemen, of Afghanistan. Of course, we all absolutely want them, and we're all, and I know you are too, Sonya, we're all working on them and with the EU itself to not reduce aid and not reduce political efforts to end conflict in such places. And the fact that there isn't resistance to that is I think, something to be encouraged.
It seems that you're starting to find a
Yeah,
bit of
which
common
is the
ground.
last thing you want. Yeah,
Doing what we
which is
were
the last
not
thing you want.
supposed to do.
No. I would say that you get like a last round of closing remarks, so you both get the chance to still respond, since we have some minutes left in the debate. That's okay for you.
Yeah, no, sure. I can think that, yes, we're not getting any verbal resistance when we go around and we say, don't forget about the other places. In reality, you know, the whole issue, walking and chewing gum at the same time is a really different thing. And so we're hearing that, just like we heard certain governments saying, no, there's not going to be cuts into your area. Well, it's happened. And I think in this instance, it's one thing to say it, and it's another to be able to do it. And it's a place and space where we all need to watch. And the other is looking at, again, time and time again, we're back into that era of looking at peace-building approaches to solving problems as being soft, as being fluffy, as being add-ons, and everybody, I mean, you know, swisspeace is putting this on, they know how hard mediation is, and there's nothing soft about it. But this is certainly an area that we need to push on, and yeah, as a way of solving problems. And we could go into some of the other areas in terms of civil society and what that really looks like. The previous panel, I think, gave us an excellent image of the state of some of these issues on civil society.
Yep, well, I'd say a ground for optimism is the fact that a number of people after last February were predicting I mean, not literally the end of the UN, but the predicting the total inability of the major organisms of the UN, such as the Security Council, to be able to operate at all. Well, actually, that didn't happen, and almost the same number of agreed presidential statements and Security Council resolutions renewing mandates in places where peace building is most required, almost all of them got through. So however bad things are, it is certainly possible, and the fact that the UN did defy predictions in that regard and has been able to carry on working almost as well, or almost as perhaps not quite almost as well, but as before, is I think, a serious ground for hope.
Okay, so our original order pre-saw that you will be having the final, kind of the final go at this debate. So, Sonya, if you would like to respond to that.
Sure. I mean, it's one thing to say that the United Nations hasn't completely disappeared. Your comment earlier around the US that they do the right thing after they've tried everything else, but look at the Trump era. It didn't demolish the entire country. You still had institutions that ran. However, they have been eroded. And I think that's the same question when it comes to United Nations, is over time, will we still have confidence in that international order? So it's still standing, but what does that foundation look like?
Are you satisfied with
that?
that?
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.